Hello everyone and welcome to the Village Halls podcast, sponsored by Allied Westminster, the UK's largest specialist provider of village hall insurance and the home of Village Guard. Now, my guest today is a well-known TV and radio presenter, an author, a cattery owner, and someone who's recently revealed, a clear passion for the kind of people who run or are in some way involved in their local village church or community hall. Pam Rhodes is probably best known as one of the presenters of the BBC's Songs of Praise television programme. And today I have to confess to being a little bit nervous, as I know she's an incredibly experienced interviewer, having chatted with, everyone from Sir Ian McKellen. And yes, that means I'm speaking to someone who knows Gandalf. Right through to Dolly Parton. She's even interviewed the Pope. So, hi, Pam. Thanks so much for joining me today. How are you?
Hello. It sounds to me as if we're going to have a lovely conversation. You're doing brilliantly. It's lovely to be here. Thanks for inviting me, Johnny.
Lovely. Thanks, Pam. Now, of course, we're going to be talking about village halls today, and a very interesting hall in particular that you, Pam, shall we say, know better than anyone. But before we get on to that, let me just ask you about your fabulous career. As I mentioned, you've met so many fascinating characters through your TV and radio work. So give me a bit of a behind the scenes into what that's all been like.
Well, I've been presenting on Songs of Praise now I think I started in 87, so it must be 34 years. I already was a presenter working in news and current affairs before that. Sort of fell into Songs of Praise quite by accident in a way, really, but have been perhaps the most familiar face in those 30 years. Obviously, there's a new generation now, and I do realise that I am ticking the diversity box now of being an OAP. But that's absolutely fine. So I don't do so many with Songs of Praise now. But the wonderful thing about that programme, bearing in mind it's 61 years old this year, is that it really is about ordinary people down ordinary streets. It's about your neighbours and mine. And the one thing about Songs of Praise, of course, is that so often those people are based around their local churches, all denominations, all under one roof, singing for the congregational singing over the years mostly. But village halls and church halls are very familiar to all of them and all the activities that go on in them. Songs of Praise has been a real pleasure. I think partly because I have a real curiosity about people and feel it is a great privilege when, not just during interviews on Songs of Praise, but during all the times when I've just been sitting alongside people or meeting them up and down the country, how they've shared their experiences, what they've been through. They share the human experience, actually, which is common to all of us, where they go through grief and bereavement and illness and look at the pandemic and all of the emotions and fears that's brought out, the challenges, the ups and downs of life, and hearing how they've coped with that, in particular with Songs of Praise people, of course, how their faith has made a difference in coping with that, how sometimes they've doubted their faith very much and how they've worked that through. I've always spoken to people on Songs of Praise looking back on life and what that's brought to them. And hindsight is a wonderful thing. And I think that's been a great privilege, really, to hear about where they found strengths, where they found themselves fearful of failing, what's meant most to them, their family, love, community spirit, friendship, all of those things, that pride, that sort of sense of belonging, just our society and how it breaks down and how you hear about it from different people has been a great, great pleasure. And of course, a rich source of meeting people when it comes to writing books.
Of all the people you've spoken to and famous or not known at all, Pam, who is there anyone kind of stands out? And
well, you mentioned Dolly Parton. I will never forget Dolly Parton. I met her at 8:30 one morning, and she looked like a film star then. She was beautifully made up, immaculately turned out. She seems to me to be only about 4 foot nothing. She's Diddy, but she is such a large and wonderful and warm personality. I absolutely loved meeting her. And I remember her saying at some point in the interview, my mum said to me when I was a young girl, you should never go to church in a skirt that's too short. And she said, I haven't been inside a church since. I doubt for 1 minute at all that that's true, because she's actually a great Christian lady who writes wonderful Christian songs. But that sense of humour is infectious, really. But
fantastic.
The people that stay with me most, honestly, are just the people who are like you and me, our neighbours up and down the country, because we all share that human experience. And very often when people are brave and generous enough to talk about perhaps painful experiences they've been through, they will never know who they touch with their words, because no one else's experience is exactly the same, but it will echo some of the feelings, some of the challenges that other people are going along as they listen. And, as they talk about looking back on a time that they felt they were in a deep, dark tunnel and couldn't see their way out, a glimmer at the end of it all, actually to hear how that glimmer became a light and how things became clearer to them can be incredibly encouraging. Very, very touching. I mean, so many people that I've met that I've been impressed by, and often they'll speak about similar themes. One of them is forgiveness. I think a lot of people carry around with them the burden of resentment and anger about things that have been said or done, or divisions, sometimes very close to home in families in the past. And I've met some remarkable people who've spoken about forgiveness, like a wonderful man who was the teacher who was stabbed by his 14-year-old pupil at a secondary school up in Yorkshire. And he talked about watching his life's blood flowing away from him and thinking he was going to die. It happened at something like 8:30 in the morning. And fortunately, of course, his life was saved by the medics. I met him about 10 months later with his family. And about a month before that, he'd been in court. And this young man, 14 years old, who stabbed him for no other reason except that this teacher had taken his phone away because he was using it in the class the day before. When he was given 11 years of sentence, both in a sort of juvenile situation and beyond, and, hoping that would give him some sort of healthy perspective on life, he yawned. He was bored to tears with the whole court procedure. And then Vincent, this man, Vincent Usama, came out on the court steps and said, I forgive him. He said, I have to let it go. I can't carry that hatred around with me. And I just hope that what he will find in what lies ahead for him in future years is a better way of living, a better way to view other people and to be part of our community. And he just said with his family, I will pray for him. And he did meet up with him and sort of befriended him and kept in touch with him over the years. And many stories like that have really touched me and that I think are lessons for us all in life.
Absolutely. It's a strong message and one that's very pertinent, of course, for our times. I think, Pam, the one you've spoken to that fascinates me more than anyone else, Gandalf aside, of course, is the famous mime artist Marcel. I can't help but think, did he actually speak to you?
Ian McKellen and Marceau. I interviewed on Radio 2. I was presenting the afternoon interview programme on Radio 2 during the weeks for quite a while. And Ian came in then, and he is a remarkable and very interesting man to talk to. But I was wondering how Marceau how this would work. But in fact, he's very talkative. He's very informative. He's no longer with us now. That was quite some time ago. But just remarkable people that I've had the chance to meet.
I think I had this bizarre, surreal kind of image in my mind of an interview taking place by a mime. Yeah.
No, it worked.
Now, look, you and I could talk about this all day, of course, but let's talk village halls. You've recently written a trilogy of books, Pam, about somewhere called Hope Hall, which, to be clear, is entirely fictitious, of course, and it's bursting with interesting characters who are in one way or another involved with the village hall, and all with their own very intriguing backstories. So tell me a little bit more about Hope Hall, Pam.
Well, the last book in that series was book number 27 that I've written. So I love writing.
Wow.
And I started writing, first of all, because I was asked by a publisher to write about behind the scenes Songs of Praise. And I realized I couldn't talk about real people that I'd met because their stories will have continued and were really not mine to tell. So I ended up writing a fictional account of a Songs of Praise being made in East Anglia, where I could pull out some of the stories that have been shared with me by the many, many people I've met over the years on Songs of Praise and create the strongest possible story for that book. And it was the start of loving writing novels, which always seem to include lots of characters and are based in communities. Well, it was while I was on Songs of Praise, I went one afternoon to what turned out to be a great big hall in the middle of Bristol. And the story, in a way, that I was covering then was irrelevant. But when I walked into this building, it just had so many nooks and crannies, and it had an upstairs balcony bar, and it had lots of offices and separate meeting rooms around the back. And when I looked at the wall where there was a timetable of all the things going on in this community hall, morning, afternoon, evening, and nighttime, there were things going on. And I just thought that's fascinating because these halls are such a meeting place of people who would never normally meet in any other walk of life. And so that was what sowed the seed for me. And it took a while actually to get round to writing the books, but what a pleasure it was. So I've taken a year in the life of just one hall. And this hall, as you say, is fictional, called Hope Hall. And rather than being a village hall, although the sentiment is just the same, this is an old memorial hall. And it happens to be based in 2020, the year of its 100th memorial. So in other words, it was built after the First World War as a memorial hall to the many young men in that town that hadn't come back and how it had devastated people's lives. And one of the storylines in it is that as it was built under the foundation stone, they did put a kind of time bomb of letters and information from the people who were involved in planning it and building it and reflecting what happened on its opening day that could then be opened and celebrated 100 years later. So I've divided the books into springtime, summertime, and Christmas at Hope Hall. So throughout the year, there are a team, really, a heart of people that you keep meeting, the staff at Hope Hall, the administrator, the catering staff, because they have a very busy cafe that's open all day long to the public. It's just off the high street, but also does catering for the OAP's lunch club and for all the other various clubs and events and anniversaries and funeral parties and gatherings of all sorts, as you know, that take place in a hall like that. But also there then could be these cameo stories throughout each of the books where you just meet people for a short time while they're taking part in that particular event. It could be the English as a foreign language class. It could be the dance night that goes on where you meet members of the group where, the lead singer is a bit of a prima donna and is getting on everyone's nerves. It could be the food bank and the mysterious man who's in rags who turns up, but is obviously very educated and trying to track down what has happened to him and to help him eventually. It could be the Waggy Dog Club, dog training classes, which of course are fraught with good fun. It could be the playgroup and all the various things going on there and the backstories of some of the people who were involved. It could be the Slimming World group, only I can't remember I think I called it the Fat Club instead, affectionately known as the Fat Club. Just so many different things. So there's a money advice group there as well that you can go for debt advice, a very, very discreetly done. And then, all the individual events that bring people along. The panto is great, good fun as well. There's the dancing class and bringing in new kinds of dancing like break dancing and tap dancing for older people. And the tremendous sense of humour, especially of the older age groups there, all the history they have, all the stories they can tell, their great sense of fun. So yeah, just a real sort of look at life, really, all meeting at Hope Hall.
Yeah, I think that's what I loved about the books is, as you say, it's jam packed full of different characters, and they bring almost different genres to the read. So you've got Kath, who's kind of the main driving force behind the whole, and there's some romance there.
Yeah.
And we've got Ray the caretaker, who he's looking after a seriously ill wife. So there's some sadness and tragedy, of course, in that. And then we've got the wonderful and aptly named Can't Sing Singers, who I think are really my favourites, you know. And then there's the comedy element, and they use the whole, and I really love them because they epitomise how it's sometimes the joy and taking part that counts rather than, shall we say, the standard of the performance.
Well, that's right. And the Can't Sing Singers are mostly made up of what had been the church choir across the road. And for decades, they'd all been singing in the church choir. And to be fair, probably the joyful sound they made on a Sunday morning was less than joyful on occasions. But they'd all been doing it for a long, long time. And when the organist, who was the musical director at that church, retired, they got a new man in, and he embraced the choral tradition and the high choral tradition at that. So he decided to audition everyone in the choir. Only one person got through who had a good tenor voice, and the rest of them were all kicked out. And they were auditions held from people who were, you know, trained in choral choirs at a very high level, and it was all very highfalutin all of a sudden. So the ones that got kicked out decided that really they quite like to keep on singing, and through the dancing school they met the pianist who did the ballet classes, and he'd come from the world of variety, really could play anything by ear, and great sense of humour. And they eventually invited him along to see whether he'd be interested in taking them on. And he just did a kind of sing-along, all sorts of different things. They were dreadful. And he just said, I'd love to take you on. I like a challenge. And he said, I've never laughed so much in my life. And what he did in the end was allow them to sing badly. But because it was so funny and they were all very sincerely singing it, and, and obviously part of the story of the joke as well, whenever they go on stage, people just end up singing along with them, crying with laughter. And you're right, it's all about the taking part, and they are the most popular item on every event that happens at Hope Hall.
Good old Ronnie the pianist.
Yes.
He's wonderful because you can tell he's an absolute professional from his background, but he doesn't care about that at all. It's the fact that people are passionate about the singing that interests him.
It's always the taking part, isn't it, Johnny? It's the taking part.
Exactly.
And I think that honestly, people, especially this year, hasn't it shown us how lonely it can be when you are locked in your own four walls? But it does take a lot of courage to go and join something, doesn't it? But if you do have the courage to join a club that you're drawn to, what you will find is lots of other people who are drawn for the same reason. So you're not meeting friends in an unnatural way. You're meeting them because you've got an interest in cooking, or because, you all like to learn a foreign language, or you'd like to try dancing or line dancing, or you've got a dog that's misbehaving. And it just allows you to meet new people in your own community, which can add a greater depth to every aspect of your life.
Yeah, as you say, especially at these times, and you alluded to COVID then. I think it's probably worth mentioning that there's no element of COVID in the book at all, is there? You've kept this out of that.
The first book. In fact, it was actually out and published the springtime at Hope Hall when COVID first started last year. And the summertime one would have come out a lot quicker, but in fact, it came out just about June this year. And the Christmas one will be coming out in September. So by Christmas, all three of them will be there. And it is a read that continues. So I think I can imagine if people enjoy the first book, they'd just be, longing to read the next thrilling installment. So I'm hoping that the fact that now all three will be out very shortly is going to be, an advantage, a bit more fulfilling for people than never knowing quite what happens in the end.
Yeah, and I think it's nice that that's not part of the story as well, because it almost provides an escape as well from all of that as well. So
that's right. I mean, who's going to want to read about that in 2 years' time? I think it's very current, isn't it? Yeah. No, it's a timeless story which just happens to be set in 2020, but it could be any year, I guess.
Yeah. Now, the thing that strikes me most of all about the books is that no one could really have written them without firstly having a deep understanding of people, but also of village hall life.
Yes.
And village halls are something you're clearly passionate about. So, broadly, where does that come from?
Do you know, I think it comes from loving dancing ever since I was a youngster and going along to dancing, tap classes, ballet classes, of doing pantomimes, all the things you do as well. There's lots of things go on, don't they, at church halls, rehearsals of all sorts. And then later on in life, teaching dancing myself. Even when I first became a presenter, I was teaching dancing in the East End of London and 2 other youth clubs, to just dancing and drama, just for fun, and but in different church halls, and just realising what a focal point they are. And then I suppose years of being at church fetes and going along and being involved in church events. I do a lot of, I'm a great anorak about hymns. I love hymns. And, I do sort of evenings of sing-along of hymns, really, at various church halls I've been to. I've been to church halls up and down the country. And I just think they are such a welcoming environment for people. It's such a wonderful way for communities to actually have almost like a living room that they can all be part of. And I think sadly, very often the organising comes down to just a few people who do all the work. But I think so many people love the fact that those village halls are there, and we need to support them. We need to support them and play our part to keep them going. They are a tremendous resource, which we will moan about losing, but we have to do our bit to keep them going, don't we?
Yeah, absolutely. And can I ask, Pam, we're getting a little bit more deep here, but it almost feels like Hope Hall is your way of highlighting the unsung heroes that you're mentioning there that lie behind this incredible network of village, church and community halls. And I mentioned at the beginning that you've interviewed many famous people, but it almost feels like through the Hope Hall books, you're paying tribute to the kind of people who are less well known, but who do incredible things for their local communities. Yeah.
Well, I think that one of the things about Songs of Praise is, even if I've met them to do an interview about something quite tragic or even quite newsworthy that's happened in their past, I always meet them afterwards, and the story, what they share with me, is always, although it might have started off with confusion and pain and worry, always ends up being quite upbeat. I meet the best people in the world over all these years. I've just had so many good news stories, really. And I think there's so much hope, so much love, so much care for other people, which are focused on those sort of communities that you're talking about. And I've just loved to bring that out. On the other hand, though, of course, so many of those people have talked about things that have happened in their lives that they could never have imagined were going to happen. And I think that's true of all of us, that bereavement might come and knock us sideways. The effect of retirement, perhaps even being laid off, and worry about money, worry about relationships, worry about different generations in the family not understanding each other or needing to care for each other. So many different but common experiences that people have. And I think that's probably what I've reflected in Hope Hall. I wouldn't say they're based on real people, but they are based on the kind of real people that I've met. And some of those stories most definitely have been shared with me by people I've met in the past. Perhaps I couldn't even put a name to them, but I feel I've been very sponge-like about the things that they've told me over the years, which just gives me a huge sort of reservoir of characters that I can create and stories that might be their own. So I think a lot of that is reflecting the people that I've been fortunate to meet over many years of Songs of Praise and everything that else that's been involved because of that.
Yeah, because that community it's about enjoyment and having fun
and support,
and those positive things. But it's also, as you say, when people have a time of need, when they're experiencing something negative in their life, being able to turn to the community in that way is so vitally important as well.
Yes, and also to remember some of the older generations, and there's a lot about the older generations in this book, they're spiky and funny and rude, and just very down to earth. Your nan, do you know what I mean? They're your nan or the lady next door.
Brilliant.
But then there are insights throughout the book where you get a glimpse of what they've been through, and a generation which in 2020 are in their 80s have been through such a lot. And sometimes what they've been through has been incredibly painful and challenging and involved a lot of rebuilding, practical, physical rebuilding, as well as emotionally rebuilding, building families again. Dealing with the past is something that they sometimes keep to themselves. And so I think what I've done quite often, you get a bright and breezy view of someone, and then occasionally you'll get a glimpse of what lies beneath that. And I would say that I believe in each of us there is a precious person within. I think the person we were created to be, with all our idiosyncrasies, our physical, our practical, our geographical, our skill set, all of the qualities that are ours, I think creates what we are. But we can be very superficial when we meet people. We can really judge books by the cover. We can allow other people's opinion to colour our opinion of people. And yet actually, if you scratch a little deeper, if you give someone the time to open up to you, you get a glimpse of that precious person within. And sometimes you will find that there are the most moving circumstances that have created them to be as reticent, as defensive or aggressive or shy or overwhelming or bossy as they are. However you find them, you'll often find there's a reason why they're like that if you take the time to get to know them. And halls like village halls, community halls, church halls allow us the chance to get to know people that we might see on the street for years, but never get to know in any other way.
Yeah, great message, Pam. Thank you so much for that. It's been absolutely great talking to you. And thanks so much. Before we go, tell me, where can people find the Hope Hall books? I guess
yes, I mean, I would say in bookshops, but I don't know how. I mean,
all good bookstores.
Most people would get it through Amazon or any other supplier. Lion Hudson are the publishers, so you can get it from them. And also, if people want me to sign it, tell them to look up my website, and I can always just organise then to get them a copy that's perhaps devoted to somebody that they'd like to give it to for a birthday present or whatever. So do contact me and I'll always help that way if I can.
Definitely will do that. And I'll put some links up on our website for all of that. And I'm delighted to say that we've got 3 copies of Springtime at Hope Hall and Summer's Out at Hope Hall to give away to our listeners. So listen up, everyone. All you have to do is get on any of our social media pages. So that's our Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, even the YouTube channel, and follow or subscribe while leaving a like or a comment with the post for this episode. It's as simple as that. We'll select 3 random winners in a few weeks' time and get in touch if you're one of the lucky ones. And let me just say, it's well worth doing so, because I've thoroughly enjoyed the books so far, Pam, and I can't wait for Christmas at Hope Hall to come out in September, and hopefully answer
resolved one way or another.
Yeah, I was going to say I want answers to the many questions left over from Summer's Out. So
we will have to have another talk, won't we? When a few more people know what the whole story is.
Exactly. All I'd say is don't leave me hanging, Pam.
Certainly not.
Yeah.
Thanks, Johnny.
Yeah, no, brilliant. So thanks again, Pam. Good luck with the books, and congratulations and best wishes with everything that you do.
Oh, thank you. And the same to all of you. And I'm delighted that you asked me. It was a great pleasure.
Yeah, no, thanks again. And that's all, folks, for this episode. Don't forget about our wonderful Villagers photo competition, where you could win £1,000 for your village hall and £500 for yourself. You can find out more on a special page on our website. And of course, thank you to our headline sponsor and specialist insurance provider, Allied Westminster, for making our podcast possible, and whose services you can discover more about at villageguard.com. And to online booking system provider Hallmaster, who also sponsor our podcast, can be found at hallmaster.co.uk. You've been listening to the Village Halls podcast, a unique listening community for Britain's village, church and community halls, and anyone interested in the vital community services they provide. We'll be back again in 2 weeks' time with another episode. So if you haven't already, please visit thevillagehallspodcast.com to subscribe, sign up for updates, link through to our social media pages, and to find out more. Until the next time, goodbye for now.